morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. It's the 21st of August.
Right? It's almost Christmas time. Holy smokes, what happened to the summer?
I woke up this morning and it wasn't actually raining last night, but I've been thinking to myself about how the weather seems to have changed a bit here right now. Because when I first came to Canada, we kind of had June and July and August were always warm, nice and warm. Typically in the 25 to 35 range, but more likely in the 25 to 30 range, with the occasional 3 or 4 days in the summer being in the 30 to 35 range. Now we seem to be we're kind of going into May in that 25 to 35 range. But in fact, actually, by the time we're in June, July, and early August, we're in the 35 to 45 range. Or at least it feels like it. Summers have gotten hotter and they've started earlier, right? So we're getting, because this year we actually had 35 plus weather in May.
Well, if you look at the whole stats, like there are definitely times when we have cooler summers and hotter summers. I think if you take everything by average, it works out to be very similar to every other summer, except there is a general warming trend overall.
And then you put this article, and then you sent this article last night. Are Canadian summers gone as we know them? Right. Well, obviously, I don't have the history that you do or many of our other listeners do about Canadian summers, but they've certainly changed in the 18 and 19 years that I've been here.
Yeah, I'll tell you that the memories I have of summer as a kid are much different from what they are now. I would say that there's a general trend, but when you look at the overall picture of weather change, is it overall or is it just year by year? If you went back to, I think it was the year 2008 or maybe somewhere around there, we had a summer where it was that almost nobody used their air conditioning. I remember that because the Nanticoke Power Station did not need major overhauls after the summer, which it normally does, because its units had not been used nearly as much as it normally would have been. And that was a year that Nanticoke Power Station did not make nearly as much money as it normally would have had.
Okay.
Because they were a peak power station.
Yeah.
And of course the big peak powers are during the winter time when you need a lot of electric heat, or even the furnace to push the heat around in your house in a gas driven or gas or fuel driven heat.
The fan drives the fan drives the heat, right?
Yeah, and plus you need a lot more light and a lot more power because it's darker.
Yeah.
But the summer was the real big one when the big heat waves came. Everybody turned on their air conditioner. There was a huge demand on the grid, and that's when they would fire up the coal burners to max and supply that power.
You put an article up there that says our Canadian summers as we know them gone, right?
Yes.
Which is another. Basically that was just an extension of the way I kind of woke up and thought about things. The last couple of days, it's been cool in the morning and evening. So I'm now wearing a long sleeve shirt, Dave. Right, wearing long sleeves because I go out of here. When I go out of here at 8 o'clock, and by the way, I do have to leave at 8 o'clock this morning. It's going to be freezing cold. Well, not freezing cold, but it's not 30 degrees. It'll be like 10.
Yeah, it's a wee bit chilly out there.
Yeah.
And the article I posted, but before I get into that, I kind of like to read off what Mike sent us a couple of days ago there, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And that goes back to the wastewater situation and Mike's observation of what happened at Regional Council.
Yeah.
Well, I'll read it up, and it says, at 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 the last Regional Council meeting, there was discussion on the infrastructure costs. Wastewater treatment became a major topic. The three main facilities in St. Catharines, Welland, and Niagara Falls are depleted. They are outdated and far behind. The increase in population of the Niagara region are estimated to increase by 200,000 people, from 500,000 to 700,000 people in a short time. This is already here, he points out, and we don't have the capacity to treat waste today or nor tomorrow. At 1 hour 45, Joyce Morocco asked hard questions on our wastewater treatment plant. At the 2-hour mark, Haley Bateman asked questions about the Welland River. A number of storm systems that do drain into the natural water bodies. In the case you are identifying, I am familiar with the situation where that was the case. It was a storm water system. So there are many storm water systems that do drain into the natural water bodies. We have a CSO annual report, which you receive. 50% of our water facilities are in trouble while we keep building and improving housing. Just recently, there were warnings for the release of affluents that will kill 60% of the fish, yet they were only given a warning by the federal government when 60% of the fish are dying and 100% of the fish are harmed. With the blue algae being at all-time highs and getting worse, how can we give the okay to build anymore without guarantees of ways to treat the wastewater? Should there not be a pause put on any building now until you catch up and get ahead of the environment, hence our health are being harmed beyond repair? You can look up the numbers and the recent articles on fines. Should our governments not get together on the important issues and figure out wastewater treatment immediately before continuing with the reckless building of so many homes without ways to treat the wastewater? If you add this to the industrial section of Niagara Falls dumping into the Welland River, the wastewater treatment problems, and the PCBs in Lions Creek, plus the wastewater from SciTech Canada Inc. and Solvay, all this goes into Lake Ontario through the Ontario Hydro Canal. Everything that goes into Lions Creek goes into the Welland River. Everything goes into the Welland River goes into the Hydro Canal, and hence Lake Ontario. So then he thanks Joyce Morocco and Haley Bateman for asking these questions. And I believe this is a reactive approach, and that's the big deal there. It's a reactive approach to wastewater treatment, is creating an environmental disaster that cannot be measured, with people eating fish, swimming, recreational uses. Exposures cannot be stopped. If we cannot treat waste, inevitably our drinking water will be so contaminated that what will we do? And that was from Mike. Thank you.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's an important question. We need to, I'm not saying we can stop the building, but we have to get the new wastewater treatment plants up and running as soon as possible.
Yes, we have to continue with the reactive measures, really, and sort of green light the wastewater treatment as fast as we can.
Yeah.
It's been brought up over and over again, as we've mentioned on the show, that these are old systems. The wastewater and stormwater sewage are systems that are very old and have been sidelined for many, many years. And now we're in a situation where we have to do it. So even though the planning did not work well, we can't just, that irks me a lot that no one planned this very well for this at all. Nevertheless, we are in the situation where we are, and we have to jump on this as fast as we can, get accelerate the development of the wastewater systems that we have in the region. Thanks again, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the question about summers and the weather, actually, yep, no, we can do that. I made my comment. Yeah. All right. So, are Canadian summers, as we know them, gone? Is a question that is asked by, well, it was asked on CBC News. It was done by a writer who writes for the Narwhal, Denise Balkison, and she is basically saying that summer's on track for being one of the second worst wildfire season in Canadian history. And I was talking about how the weather patterns had changed, but she's talking about how fire is changing the landscape. So it started earlier than usual with emergency declared in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and is hitting localities that aren't typically fire prone, like Vancouver Island and the Maritimes.
Yeah, there's this trend that's being noticed. Now, I warn about this because if you look back through history, you'll find all kinds of exceptions to the normal weather.
Yeah.
You know, when you take weather and you map it over across 150 years, you're going to get you're going to get a norm, basically. But there's going to be radical differences in different years. It's going to be radically cool one year, radically hot another year, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's not a sign of, that's not necessarily, or it may be, or it may not be a sign of global, climate change. All right. And the other thing she was talking about is parts of southern Ontario are suffering the worst air quality in the world, right? In the world.
Yeah, in the last couple of years because of the major fires we've had.
Yeah.
This is a trend, like I said. Now, climate change. Most experts believe that climate change is an issue here, and this may be the effect of climate change in Canada. It takes a while to sort that out. It takes a while to sort that out and make sure.
What she's more or less saying is that it more or less is that what we're having, the new norm may well be, or she's afraid that the new norm is from May till September, fire season.
I'm not so sure because,
and she's more or less indicating, well, she's fearful the fires are getting closer to the cities.
Yeah, and popping up in places that it normally did not in years past.
Yeah. No, I went to her Narwhal article, which was written yesterday, and she's saying the summer's been a bummer. Family regular camping trip to cottages marked by a warming world. On one oppressive heat made sleeping impossible at the campsite. A fire ban has taken roasted marshmallows off the menu for the third trip, but at least it's going ahead now with that a wildfire in the lakes is under control. In Kawartha Lakes is under control as smoke traveled over my hometown of Toronto. So that's given the information about how she feels it's being oppressive across all of the whole region, the whole area. And she highlights to point out Paro's St. Lawrence Parish mass on at 10 o'clock, where they're saying pray for rain.
Yeah, well, like I like to caution, climatologists will caution you too. Once climatologist information gets into the press, and then they try to convert it into lay language, and of course they quite often exaggerate or make wrong predictions and so on and so forth. This author has pointed out, things feel different now than it did
Oh.
when she was a child. So yeah, that could be. But in order to get the real effect,
yeah, she's talking on a personal level. She's not talking scientific analysis here. She's just talking about her personal observations over time. Right?
yes.
Yeah.
So I warn about that, because climatologists will tell you that as well. Although most climatologists will tell you that that climate change is a real thing and the planet is getting hotter. That's kind of indisputable. But the ramifications of that are varied. Now we may get into a decade full of more moisture in the air, therefore more rain and cooler summers. It could go the other way. It could get drier. Then, of course, you have the El Nino and the El Nino effect, and all of those come into effect. So until the climatologists sort this out, now there's a.
Well, I don't think there's anything to sort out. What they need to do is they need to kind of they've got to kind of come up with what our new climate is. That I think is what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, and how much it will really affect you. And there's a lot of false information out there. For instance, we hear about a lot of hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina and places like that have devastated the southeastern United States, and even in Texas and so on. But and of course it's attributed to climate change. Whereas I listened to one commentator and he said, no, it looks like that because the hurricanes and other hurricanes, particularly in Florida, and that seem to be much worse than they used to be, because the population centers have increased in Florida, and more homes and businesses and things are in vulnerable areas where they weren't before.
Yeah.
So when you compare the damages done by hurricanes 40 years ago to what they're doing now, you think, oh, well, that's much more damage. Well, it doesn't take into effect that the populations have increased and are in these vulnerable areas, and it looks much worse than it actually is.
Yeah. And
on the other hand, the same commentator said that climate change really is an issue more seen in the Pacific areas, the South Pacific areas, where it really is quite a bit different than it was before. But we really don't get much of that news, do we, here? We just get stuff about Florida and North America.
Yeah. So to take Florida, what you were saying there with Florida, you're absolutely, they're absolutely right, because, when a hurricane, I can remember from like 40 years ago, because we always used to see the hurricane news. When a hurricane made landfall, it was more the news when it was actually out off the coast and how it was building up and how they were expecting it to make landfall. And then when it made landfall, it destroyed 150 homes. Nowadays, the same kind of hurricane that's making landfall is now destroying 900 homes.
Yeah, and that hurricane may have made landfall in exactly the same spot as it did before.
It's affected like 100 square miles, the same as it did before, but that 100 square miles now affects so many more homes.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing you have to look at. And when journalists have a difficulty in translating that, of course, they need the headline too. So when they go around and say climate change, way more hurricanes, Florida's going to this and that and whatever, they're kind of missing the point. They have to first say things like, if there is a increased incidence in hurricanes because of climate change, global warming, they have to prove it. But when it comes to Florida stuff, it's hard to prove because they always get them. And the damage done nowadays is much more than it ever was because of the increased amount of populations.
Yeah. There's more homes, right?
More homes, more businesses, the whole works.
Yeah.
So of course that same hurricane hit in the exact same spot 40 years ago may have done $100 million worth of damage, and now it may do $1 billion worth of damage, and it could be the same hurricane hitting the same spot. So it looks like it's a lot worse than it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said before, the commentator, that goes back a ways, so I can't remember exact details. But he talked about the Southeast Asia and typhoons and different other weather systems that are completely different from what was before, and which is a harder indication of how global warming has affected the planet. He commented that that which was happening in the southern United States is the one that gets the eyes, but where it really is making quite a bit of difference is in places like Southeast Asia, where the weather has changed more radically, apparently, than around here.
Okay. Well, actually, so Mike made a comment. There seem to be these fires seem to be terrorism. I wonder how many are man-made fires, and that's an interesting question, because I remember about 5 years ago when we were seeing a lot of California wildfires. When they were investigating those wildfires in California, the firefighters actually believe that probably something in the region of 30% of those fires in California were man-made, or at least,
well, they're the accidental ones,
not necessarily deliberately made, but made because people left things like bottles lying around.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people who are just not really responsible with a campfire or
terrorism, but not terrorism, not crime, but stupidity.
But on the other hand, look at our own town and look at all the people going around and burning old buildings just to see them go up as a thrill. Oh, yeah. So there is this thing called an arsonist and a pyromaniac, and you can understand that a pyromaniac or somebody twisted in their head or some political motivation even may light a bunch of fires to make a point. You know what I mean? If you had, I don't know, if you had some political anarchist or nihilist figured, well, they might be able to start fires and disrupt the political wherewithal of an area, they might do it. So there is that possibility. I mean, it goes back to the times when people were blowing up pipelines and things like that, under the guise of being environmentalists. If you blow up a pipeline, you limit the amount of oil that can be used. Therefore, you're saving the planet, which is twisted logic, because if you blow up a pipeline here, the people just get the oil from the pipeline over there.
Yeah. And in fact, what happens is it wastes money. You have to you rebuild the pipeline, and within 3 months, the thing's going again anyway.
So let's be very clear. There is a global warming. That's indisputable. And that has been happening since 1750. They mark the year 1750 because they feel that was the year that the Industrial Revolution kicked in for good. Although the Industrial Revolution can be traced back to nearly as far back as 1700. The Newcomen pump, steam engine and pump in 1715 was called the real start of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, I was just going to say
that you would have to wait till James Watt gets into the situation and others like him that really converted steam power into usable power. So they used that marker 1750. What was the weather like prior to 1750? And what was it after, when the Industrial Revolution in Britain really kicked off and, of course, then spread all over the world?
Well, it was, I suppose, you see, yes, there
are distinct differences.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution started, as you said, 1715. I think that's about the right date. But by 1750, the movement had become so massive that you couldn't deny that the Industrial Revolution was well and truly underway.
Yes, and having an effect.
Yeah,
and that's the main. So so they call 1750.
I don't know that those who lived in the time recognized there was an effect, but we, looking back on history, may recognize that.
Well, we can talk all day about that. There's a bunch of different factors there. We find the shift of people coming in from the countryside to the city to work in industries.
That's a part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and ironically, even in the desperate conditions of the factories and the mines that the Brits had, we hear all kinds of stories about how brutal they were. Despite all that, industrial production increased the life expectancy of people, improved their life expectancy. More people were getting fed, more people were getting money, even though they were still very poor. But they were better off than they were when they were on the land, oddly enough.
But the irony, of course, is that the Luddites' argument was actually that peasants were better off than many of the city poor at certain times. So both arguments.
That's a whole different thing. The Luddites and the whole idea of Captain Swing back in the 1830s, where weavers, and in that particular case, it was the weavers that were being displaced by mechanical means of making more and more bolts of cloth in the Manchester, I think it was the Manchester mills that made these
Lancaster mills, not Manchester.
Lancaster,
yeah.
Okay, and so
Manchester was the port they shipped them through, right? Yeah.
So there were so there's all kinds of issues there, but basically too, and with climate, you have to you have to be able to consider what happens when a volcano goes up. In the year 1815 to 1816, it was called the years without a summer because of it wasn't Krakatoa, it was its other one. In 1815, there was a massive volcanic explosion that made Krakatoa look small, actually, filled the earth with enough soot to reduce the summers to nearly nothing. And it was snowing in June.
Yeah. I have no recollection of which one and what that. I know about the incident. I don't have a recollection of the volcano name.
Yeah, it starts with a K too, and I'll look it up in a minute. I have Krakatoa. I can always remember that was the 1880 one. Yeah, but it's the other one.
And Mike is saying it seems the weatherman says conditions are perfect for a fire and poof, it happens. We all know how wrong weathermen are, and yet this happens a lot.
Mount Tambora. That exploded in 1815.
Yeah. Right.
It made Krakatoa look like a firecracker, by the way. That's how huge it was.
1 to 10, I'd say 8. Intentionally done. Yeah. Okay. So Lee is basically saying intention. There's an 8 out of 10 possibility of intention. Mike says it seems the weatherman says the conditions are perfect, and bang, there's a fire. Right.
All right. Let's make this very clear. The vast majority of the fires that are started up in the forest, the remote forests, and so on, are done by lightning.
Yeah,
that's the vast majority of them are started by lightning.
Some are brought on by human. Some are encouraged by human stupidity, such as leaving bottles in the forest and things like that.
Well, even nowadays, I haven't done any outdoor stuff for several years now, but even at that, when I noticed people coming up to the cottage or other people, and they were tending their campfires at night, how few of them took care of those fires. I'll tell you an incident that I had in my own cottage, that I left the fire going overnight and let it just burn down. I figured, oh, well, I don't have to dose this one. And yet in the morning I woke up and the fire had spread under all the dried out moss around the rocks there. And all the area around the fire was smoldering because small amounts of that fire managed to grow out of the bed of the of the fire
it's
place
big.
that I had out there and just
Yeah.
moved. So I woke up in the morning and I thought, well, that's mist. And no, it wasn't. It was all the mosses all in and around it
Yeah.
had been ignited and were all
Well,
smoldering.
the fire
I
spit,
went out
right?
quickly and extinguished them all. But that's the kind of situation that could have got really out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, it could have done. But you see, fire spits, right? You know, when you're sitting around the fire, you kind of stomp out those bits where it flies, flies up and spits out
Embers, the gold embers.
an ember, yeah. Yeah. You tend to stomp on them when you're there sitting around the fire, whereas if you're not there, there's nobody to stomp on them, and that's what causes the moss and light to catch light.
Yeah, so the vast majority of the major forest fires are caused by lightning. There's another amount that is just done by foolish ignorance on how to attend to a fire and what to do with it. You got to quench it, particularly at night, and other people just do not do what they're supposed to do with a fire. We were always taught what to do with a fire. I don't think people are taught anymore.
Well,
I think we even
say,
got it in school.
Yeah, I have to say that I do remember it in school. I do remember being taught about fires in school. Do I remember what was said? No. I've never really had the need to set a campfire.
They used to give us films.
Yeah.
Little films.
I'm sure.
Instructional films on what to do with a fire, how to take care of it, how to make sure that it's out.
Yeah.
One of the things you do is you wet down, you get pails of water and you wet down the area around the fire and the fire itself. Then you stir the fire, even if it's out. You stir that fire with a stick, that fireplace, after you've quenched it, and then quench it again and stir the fire again over and over. And I remember that, and that's what I would always do, except that one time that I told you. And that's the best way, because stir it and then soak it. The embers are under
I would
there.
never remembered. I remember that thing about soaking the area. I remember the thing about doing the pit, but I hadn't a clue. Couldn't remember at all the bit about stirring it. Maybe that was taught differently in England than here.
It's essential, because what happens is if you got a bunch of charcoal on top, it's underneath, it's still going. So that's why you want to take a stick and stir all the ashes around. And if you do that, you will find that you'll get sparks coming up. When you do that, even after you've quenched it and you thought to yourself, well, I thought I quenched this, but you didn't. So you stir it and you quench again. But aside from that, aside from accidents or ignorance that human-made fires, even the odd pyromaniac, the vast majority of the fires are started by lightning. This is a natural process. Remember too that this is a natural process. Whole forests require fires. It's part of their ecosystem. It's part of their evolution. In order to crack open some of the acorns for, let's say, a whole amount of different varieties of trees, they have to have fire go through there. And the fire goes through there, cleans out all the accumulated stuff, and restarts life by opening up the acorns. And the acorns have to have fire to do that.
Acorns.
And one of the problems with our vast amount of fires right now is our mismanagement of the fires. We haven't allowed them to burn. We've protected them too well, and the accumulation of stuff on the floor of the forest is now way too much. It would have been burned off by natural fires, but it accumulates too much. And now once the fire does start, it's much bigger than it would normally be. Add to that a rather dry season, and you get enormous fires. So part of it is mismanagement of forest. There's a number of different reasons that forest fires are the way they are now. Dryness and heat that actually contributes to it, but mismanagement of the forest in the past by not allowing fires is part of the reason why our fires now are bigger and uncontrollable.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So going to move on. Question over whether local authorities should revamp their user fees. There was a report commissioned by St. Catherine's that was presented to St. Catherine's City Council this week by Blackline Consulting that found that St. Catherine's is underperforming in several revenue generating areas compared to similar municipalities elsewhere. That highlights the fact that the city collects significantly less in user fees for many services like recreation planning and bylaw enforcement than its peers. And for example, it's saying St. Catherine's could potentially generate $7.5 million a year more on recreation fees alone.
Yes. Now this is a very controversial situation here. Now, every one of our cities have overspent. Every one of our cities are in debt. Ontario's in debt. Canada's in debt. Debt. We are addicted to debt. Now, what happens when you get addicted to debt? You now find your ability to be able to pay your bills limited and provide services to your citizens limited too, because now you are incurring a debt and you're paying off interest on your debt. You have much less available to your citizens, and what does that make you do? You have to borrow more to pay more for your debt and to provide for your citizens.
Yeah.
So that is part of the argument that St. Catherine's has made. Well, if we up our user fees to be those equal to other municipalities, we could get another $7.5 million. The real issue here is, though, who do you hurt when you do that? So the whole idea, if you increase user fees, then you'll get some more money that you don't have to put onto the tax polls. But really, you are taxing the persons that are using it. Now, how do you increase the user fee without hurting the person that's using it?
Yeah. And again, the same is true for for planning and bylaw enforcement. So these departments have room to increase the cost recovery through updated fee structures and enforcement strategies. So by that, planning, if you're doing planning of buildings and development, etc., you can up the fees and therefore get more money into the city coffers. What they're basically saying is that there's 8 other lower tier municipalities, presumably of a similar size to St. Catherine's, where analysts have been showing that St. Catherine's has been lagging behind the average user fees to offset service costs in those municipalities.
Well, you have to look at the municipality too, and the stratification of society in that. So if you're taking if you take somebody something like Mississauga, where the mean average of income is very high, well, you can give higher user fees and it's not going to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But let's say you're taking like swimming pools or other recreational facilities in St. Catherine's, in this particular St. Catherine's, or you could even say Niagara Falls. Let's say the arenas or something like that.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, our user fees aren't enough. When we go do public skating, we're not charging enough. Well, these are activities that families with lower incomes depend on for the recreation for kids.
I accept what you're saying there, and I 100% understand. But let's say if, for example, they're saying that other municipalities, and I'm just taking this as an example. It's not anywhere indicated in here. No particular fees are. But let's say to go skating on the Gale Centre, you're currently charged $1, and in other areas, typically it might be $4.50 on average. All right. So if you were to put the dollar up to $1.25, and slowly moved it up over 5 to 10 years, then perhaps it isn't such a bad thing.
No, these things are basically have to be looked at. And in the article, it does say what I had just said. How will it affect it? So if you increase the prices, you may reduce the users.
Yeah, that's true.
And then you just shot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Well, you want these facilities to be available to your populace, but if you make them a little bit too expensive, then less people will come. If less people will come, then your revenue will not increase, will it?
Yeah.
And less people are served by that.
Yeah. And for example, just putting the fees up from $1 to $1.25 may make all the difference, mightn't it?
It may. But like I say, you have to be very careful because if you're doing a skating rink or a public pool or something of that kind, you have to be very, very cognizant of the fact of how much it costs and how many people at the lower tier economic zone, basically, levels are dependent on inexpensive services provided by the city.
Well, yeah. The other sort of thing that can also come into play here is not just the fees to actually go to somewhere, to use the skate, the idea of using the skating, for example, used to be when I was a kid, there'd be often for kids, it was free or low cost, very low cost. So
yeah, we used to have all kinds of free rigs.
Yeah, if an adult paid, let's say $5, a child would pay 50 cents.
Well, here is so they compared it to Milton, Burlington, Niagara Falls, Kitchener, Waterloo, Oakville, Cambridge, and Whitby. Now, the real problem here is the only comparative city here is Niagara Falls. It is within the region, and we know that our region overall has less income than average of Ontario. So if you take Milton, Burlington, Kitchener, Waterloo, Oakville, Cambridge, and Whitby, you take those cities, they are much more affluent than St. Catharines or Niagara Falls. So of course, they're going to be able to charge more because of the affluence of their citizenry. Well, so that is a big problem there. What cities do you compare it to?
Yeah, yeah. And again, you're making comparisons with generally larger cities. Halton maybe not, but
I'm comparing them to the cities that have much more affluence than we do. Milton, Burlington, Kitchener, Waterloo, Oakville, Cambridge, and Whitby have a lot more money than we do. They have a lot higher standard of living if you look at it.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. But they're also larger cities.
There are I don't know how Cambridge wouldn't be that big, would it?
Well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe Cambridge is actually one, but again, you're right. It's a more affluent area.
So that's my point here. If you start comparing yourself with more affluent cities, then in sort of like Kitchener, Waterloo, or Cambridge, or Whitby. Let's say Whitby. Whitby is is pretty much a suburb of Toronto where people with money go to have. I mean, if you go to Whitby, I mean, it's much more affluent. It's you know what I mean. It's like comparing it to Mississauga or something like that. So that I think is a problem right there. Is are you comparing apples to apples?
Yeah.
So of course you're comparing apples to apples, but you might not be comparing the high end apple to the low end apple. So the biggest concern that I can see with raising fees is how are you going to affect that person? Well, here comes the lawnmower.
Yeah.
How are you going to affect that person at the lower tier level?
Yeah.
That person who has a family and struggling to get work and is very happy to send the kids off to the public pool, so they can have some fun, and it costs them $1 or so. But if it starts costing them $5 and you got a couple of kids, that might make a bit of a difference.
Exactly.
And that kid might be not be able to go every day. So these are so basically it does say in the article that you have to be very cognizant of the fact of, if you increase the fees, are you going to reduce the usership?
Yeah. Mike is making the point of, they price people out of homes now, they price them out of sports. The point being is that that you might be able to afford your kid to go to go somewhere at $1 a day, but you can't do it at $5 a day.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's the basic issue here. So this is a good reason to get some money back into in this particular case, into the coffers of St. Catharines, $7.5 million. And if you can increase it so that it is not burdensome to those who depend on it, rather than, like, if I wanted to go to the public pool, and have a swim during adult times, if there is such a thing anymore, you pay your money, jump in the pool, whatever. So I got to, it's not going to hurt me if it goes up from $5 to $10 or whatever it is. But what it will do is it will hurt that family that, that is struggling to make ends meet, even those that have to watch every penny. So so what you want to do is maintain your usership, even increase it. If you increase the usership, then you'll get more money. But if you add more cost to it, it might reduce the usership, which would negate the effects of negate the gains that you're looking for.
Yeah. Right. And And Lee's agreeing with Mike about having priced people, wanting to price people out of recreational things.
How somebody going to get hockey equipment for the kid nowadays? Even a soccer ball, maybe, or even joining a soccer league for your kids. That might be a little bit too much. Now, most people would sacrifice, postpone that new the new refrigerator they want, because their old one is still working, but they know they should really get a new one. But they might postpone that purchase to make sure their kids get signed up for soccer or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and there are some sports that are more expensive than others. There are some activities that are more expensive than others by pure definition. Because, for example, if you're a goaltender in hockey, that's quite an expensive bit of kit you've got to get there.
Yeah, when I was a kid, there was things called skate exchanges, where you got, like, I never had a new pair of skates until I was 18 years old. It was always skate exchanges or hand-me-downs or something like that. So I never got a new pair of skates. And then when we did, my father and I bought a new pair of skates. We have the same foot size. So he'd use them to play hockey, and I would use them to play hockey.
Yeah.
So we would share that pair of skates, because skates are expensive. Good pair of skates are expensive. So how are you going to get your kid involved in the hockey? Now, when I was a kid, it was skate exchanges. Every year you went to the skate exchange in your local school, usually it was, and people were
so you'd offer
handing you their old skates, and you were handing down your skates. So when I was the skates that I had when I was 8, I'd take them and I'd hand them over to another kid, and I would get the skates from somebody else, and they'd be much cheaper.
Yeah. Exactly. So you'd be selling a pair of size 5s and buying a pair of size 6s.
That's right. And they'd be used.
Yeah.
So the kid that was older than me would be getting rid of his skates, and I'd be buying them. And then in my skates, I'd be selling them to the kid that's younger than me. And it'd be much less expensive that way. But I don't think that really happens anymore. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, that's, that actually is an important point of what you say there. And the other thing would be true also of jerseys and the like, right?
All those kind of things. I remember the last year we played lacrosse, we got a donate. We didn't have jerseys. We didn't have money for jerseys. So our team, So
Yeah.
what we did was we got hand-me-downs of an old hockey team. So we had these jerseys that had holes in them and stuff like that, and we had to change our name to whatever was on the jersey.
All right, I have to go at 8, by the way, bang on. So we have to wrap it up at 8. All right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, those, that has to be taken into consideration. I don't know that they're doing that right. All right. Let's put that, send that message back to the cities. All right. Okay. The Trump administration is sanctioning a Canadian judge on the ICC for what they said. They've also sanctioned 4 other jurists, International Criminal Court, because of what they've said about prosecuting Israeli leaders.
Yes, and this particular judge we're talking about, her name is Post. She's a Canadian, and they're going after her for a couple of different reasons. What?
It's not Post, it's Prost.
Prost. Sorry, Prost. And they're going after her for a couple of different reasons.
And they're also going after 3 other justices, Nicolas Giblett from France, Nazat Shazim Khan from Fiji, and Mame Mandaya Niang from Senegal.
Yeah, this is a message. This is a message from the United States that if you prosecute people we don't want you to prosecute, we're going after you. We're going to make your life difficult. We're going to make your life hurt. We're going to make life difficult for you because you are prosecuting crimes we don't want you to prosecute.
Yeah.
When the Prost, for instance, was looking into just the very idea that they were looking into crimes against humanity in Afghanistan, they included not just what the Taliban did or what ISIS was doing there, but also what the American or other allied groups were doing there. Were the Americans. So there were reports about what the Americans were doing in Afghanistan, and some didn't sound too good. This happens when anytime you bring in military into a place, sometimes it's really unavoidable to get the military into places where they overdo it. So they're looking into that. Just for the fact that they were looking into it, it brought up issues with the United States.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why the Trump administration is after Prost, because she not initiated, but looked into, was an agreement that they should look into humanitarian problems in Afghanistan, which would include the Americans.
Yeah.
Since that time, however, because any human rights things by the Americans were so much less than what was happening with the Taliban, they kind of shifted their primary focus onto the Taliban, which you can understand. Now, the other thing, though, the big thing now is the ICC is looked really hard at Israel, and the United States has said that if you go after people we like Israel, we're giving them the bombs, we're giving them the license, we're giving them the political cover, because we can veto anything in the UN, and that's what we want. So if you're going after people that are doing terrible things with our help, we're going after you.
Yeah.
So they were actually targeting individual judges, sanctioning their holdings, and making life very difficult for them. And this is a message, right? Yes, all people are equal, but some people are more equal than others. So we'll tell you who those are. If you go after Benjamin Netanyahu or Gallant, we're going to hurt you. We're going to hurt you bad, because no matter how many crimes they commit, we don't want you to bug them at all.
Yeah. All right. And the court, of course, has responded by saying it deplores sanctions and calling for them a flagrant attack against the independence of an impartial judicial institution that operates under the mandate of 125 countries from all regions of the globe.
Yeah, quite right. So the very idea that the court has to be impartial.
Yeah.
Right. So the court comes up and remember, South Africa brought this issue first. Ireland was very, very vocal on it as well. And in the very beginning, when Gallant says we're going to cut off water, we're going to cut off food, we're going to cut off air if he could have, water, food, we're going to cut it all off. All medical services, we're going to cut it all off. In the very first days of the war, before they even invaded. And that's the process they've used. Back in March, they cut off aid in order to force the Hamas to surrender. Of course, that didn't work. The world got all crazy. So they're using food and other things, all kinds of, you can see what's happening in the West Bank. And so when the World Court goes and looks at this and says, these are crimes against humanity, obviously they are, in the United States. So, well, we don't want you to say that. We don't want you to do that. We want you to look the other way.
And actually, let's be very clear. How many countries was it? 125 countries they were talking about. I think it's all in all, when the court was set up, there was, I think, about in the region of 180 countries that signed the international treaty that brought the International Criminal Court into play. Now, International Criminal Court is used for one thing and one thing only, which is for criminal acts involving war. Right, so that's what they're primary
or crimes against humanity.
Yeah,
of one kind or another.
Yeah, primarily war. But at the same time, and given that the United States of America was one of the original signatories, the United States of America has always made it clear that it will not put up its political leaders and send them to The Hague if The Hague believes that they are responsible for crimes against humanity.
Well, the U.S. doesn't U.S., China, Russia, Israel, any of these countries that are going to be imposing themselves on others do not recognize the court. However, the rest of the world does, and that's the issue with the United States. Do what we tell you. They're okay with they were okay with the ICC going after Russia for invading Ukraine. That was no problem. Right, that was no problem. Yeah, Putin was a war criminal. Look what he's doing. Yeah, ICC, way to go.
Yeah,
but when it comes to Israel and the outrage committing in Gaza and the West Bank, you better look the other way.
Yeah, and of course, the International Criminal Court, is not seeing it the same way as the US has done, and US has always seen it has seen itself as being special.
Look, the United States, China, Russia, the big players here, the United States especially, is saying there are. We'll tell you which crimes to which crimes to go after.
Yeah.
So we don't want you to go after Israel. They are our buddy, and they're using our weapons. So if you're going after Israel for bombing the crap out of little kids, then you might come back to us and say, hey, the weapons you gave them makes you complicit. They don't want anything like that.
Yeah.
Basically what they're saying is there are exceptions, and we are one of those exceptions, and we'll tell you what to do. And if you don't do what we say, we're going to hurt you. We're going to go after your judges. Can you imagine can you imagine in Canada and somebody, a judge is brought before the court that members of parliament have been involved in some sort of corruption, and then the prime minister saying, we're going to sanction you, we're going to go after you for going after these politicians. Yeah, go ahead, go after anyone else you want, but don't go after my politicians.
Yeah, but it's like the US. It's like the US is saying, yeah, sure, go after those criminals, those war criminals in Rwanda, or those ones in Argentina, or you know what I'm saying, or those war criminals in the Philippines. Go after all of those countries. You have that permission, but don't come near the United States ever, or its allies.
Or its allies, particularly like it is grotesque the way they protect Israel. Grotesque the amount of atrocities they permit. We can see this one in particular, where 1,200 people were killed by that maniac Yahya Sinwar, and yet, okay, well, let's get a revenge. We're not going to have enough revenge unless we kill 100 of them, and 100 to 1, that kind of thing.
All right,
and the United States says, okay, that's good with us.
Yeah, and with that, I'm going to have to call it quits. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So justice, world justice, and equity in justice will always be dependent on those who are the more powerful. We find out that even now in our system, even though it's supposed to be equal, the more money you have to buy the more expensive lawyers, the more justice you get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much what the United States is, or even China, or something says here, is you don't have enough money to charge this, and we're going to hurt you. Yeah. So anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. I've mentioned Gaza there, so I'll mention it again like I always do. Don't forget Gaza. Outrage after outrage is happening with the United States backing them up.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.